Okay, so I want to show you in real life an example of this conversation. So over here on the left-hand side of the screen, this is a book that was written in 1979 by Irving Goffman, who was a very well-known and highly respected social psychologist and cultural sociologist. Kind of worked in both those areas. It's called Gender Advertisements. Well, I want to follow this along. In 2011, Mager and Hedgeson published a paper, 50 Years of Advertising Images, Some Changing Perspectives on Role Portrayals Along with Enduring Consistencies. They drew from and they cited Goffman in their work. Then in 2017, Boyd and Murrin cited the 2011 study, Thin and Sexy versus Muscular and Dominant, Prevalence of Gendered Ideals in Popular Dolls and Action Figures. Right, so we can see how these are kind of related through time here. These ideas in scholarship, the ideas kind of spawn people to either oppose it and so figure out a way to show that this is not what they think is going on, or support it, or take smaller ideas and explore them further. Let's develop this idea a little bit more. So it can get pretty complicated. We also mention that the third study here, the 2017 study, the middle one, the 2011 study, these scholars are South African scholars, right? So we've got United States, South Africa, come back United States. So it's, right, so it's a worldwide kinds of conversations. And in nursing, again, yeah, this is a worldwide conversation. Some innovations come from Africa. Some innovations come from South America or Asian countries. Does that make sense? And hopefully you've already, those who've been studying for a while, you've already seen this. You know, papers published, paper coming out of Dublin, Ireland, or Trinity College, or a paper coming out of a college in Mexico, or something like that. Does that make sense? Hopefully you'll see that. I always find it interesting. I like to pay attention to that when I'm reading scholarly information. I always really like to see, okay, where's this idea coming from? Okay. Another way of thinking about citations. How many of you like getting shout outs? Yeah, somebody's raising their hand. I see all you other ones saying, yeah. What's it like to get a shout out? Why do we like it? Recognition, yeah. It's a very cool thing to get a publication back and see your name as the author. Yeah, it's a really cool feeling. Let me ask a variation on that. How many of you have given a shout out to someone? What's it like giving a shout out?
Just want to make sure you get the right.
And it's really interesting. The emotional centers in the brain for both getting a shout out and giving a shout out are the same. So as far as the brain is concerned, they're the same thing. I like to suggest to students, what if we think about citations as shout outs? Right? This person, even if you disagree with them, they helped you learn, right? All right, so how would citation become different if we reframed it in terms of, I'm giving a shout out? Right, and so we're right, and when we give shout outs, we get that kind of sensation of pleasure as well, right? And we feel grateful. If anybody is interested, read some of the psychology on gratitude and mental health. Really cool stuff. So I want to try to help us kind of start reframing that. Think about citations as, I'm giving a shout out to these people or this person or this organization. Okay, we do need to talk a little bit about the R word, responsibility. First of all, again, kind of redoubling back on the shout out idea. This is how citations are how we acknowledge that. But there's also a kind of a darker side. We do have responsibility to tell where we get our information in scholarship. A lot of everyday kinds of writings, we may not be expected to quite as much, but when we're talking about scholarship, we need to acknowledge that. So we need to start seeing kind of everyday writing and scholarly writing as different instances. And that can be tricky. Proper citation is part of respecting intellectual property. Anybody heard that concept before? Okay. I just want to take a minute or two to talk a little bit about intellectual property for a minute. I think having some of this background understanding, again, I have found in my experiences that students respond to this well. It helps them get into it a little bit more. So intellectual property refers to creations of the minds, such as inventions, artistic works, other things that are protected by intellectual property law, code for computer programs, dances, choreography, photographs, film, right? So anything that's kind of the product of somebody's imaginative or inventiveness is covered under intellectual property law. There are three types of protections: copyright, patents, and trademarks. We're going to come back and we'll talk a little bit more about copyright here in a second. Patents. What do patents protect? Inventions, and closely associated with that are processes along with that prevention. Along with that and that go along with that invention. Yeah, so what the end product, but also all the process that leads up to it, that's protected. Trademarks. Yeah. How many of y'all have used like a McDonald's M in a presentation or a Nike swoop or something? I'm glad, because you're not in violation of the law. As students, not in an engineering field, copyright is what we'll be looking at the most. And I love to point this out to students. Because a lot of times it can seem like, oh, copyright, I can't use it. They don't want me to use it. But it's interesting. This is bottom line is the language from the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, about copyright. To promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right respecting their writings and discoveries. A couple of things here. It's for a limited amount of time. At present, copyright, if it's from an individual, lasts the lifetime of the creator plus 70 years. If it's what's called a work for hire, so it's produced by a company or an organization, so like Disney films, for example, they get protection for lifetime. They get the protection for up to 90 years. And in some cases, but copyright law is really complicated, right? Because under certain circumstances, a company can get 110 years of protection. And under certain conditions, individual copyright can be less time. So it's complicated. If you ever have a question, on this campus, I'm kind of the copyright guy. So I'll be happy to help with that. There are other tools out there, but that's not what we're focusing on today. Okay. The other thing that's important is to promote the progress And that is, there are cases in which we can use copyrighted material. And so this, as students, right, when we cite, when we quote from a source or pull ideas from a source, we're protected under fair use. Excuse me. Now, don't take that too far, right? A, cite the source, and B, only use the minimum amount necessary for your use. This will change though after y'all graduate and are in professional practice. If you want to publish, fair use gets a little bit harder to work with. But right now, you've got a little bit more range, a little bit more activist. Does that make sense? Another thing that's really important to understand with copyright, what copyright protection gives, it gives protection to the expression of an idea, the way that that idea is expressed. It doesn't protect the idea itself. Right? Because if it covered the idea itself, nobody could innovate. Right? Like iPhone was the first smartphone. If that idea were copyrighted, and Android, and then later Google, when they purchased them, could never create a smartphone. So really important to understand, it's not the specific idea itself, it's the expression of that idea. This comes into play, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, with paraphrasing. So when you paraphrase something, what you're doing is you're using somebody else's idea, you're dressing it up differently, but you're using their idea and presenting it, giving them credit. That makes sense? I hope so, yeah. Okay. I like to also point this out. I've heard some students say, oh, plagiarism isn't all that big a thing. Well, yeah, it is. It is actually a federal crime in the United States. If you were to go somewhere else that had a different set of copyright laws and violate that country's copyright laws, that becomes an international crime. A couple of recent examples. 2018, Dr. H. Gilbert Welch was at Dartmouth College, and he plagiarized from some of his own colleagues in the department, and so he was pressured to resign, and he did. So a big lesson there: don't plagiarize from somebody you know. The other one is in 2014, John Walsh, who was at the time Montana congressman. He plagiarized in his master's degree, his master's thesis. And when that came to light, he'd written his master's thesis at the Army War College. The college stripped him of his degree, and the state party told him they wouldn't back him if he wanted for re-election. And so this is serious, and things like that. So we do need to pay attention to these. Right, this is somebody else's work, and they're protective of it. Yeah, so this is really important. So when we talk about these things, I like to give you a little bit fuller picture of this as to why we're doing this and why you're being asked to do it. I think it's easier when you get a fuller picture. And that's been my experience with students in the past.